no sentencing today that has anything to do with collusion with Russia in the campaign. It's very similar to what Mr. Cohen, a new favorite of all of yours, said under oath last week, that he has no proof of no collusion.
Counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, a judge sentencing Manafort Thursday to less than 4 years in prison for tax and bank fraud, but that's far less than prosecutors say he deserves. Fox News producer Jake Gibson.
We came in there with the idea that he could get 19 to 24 years, and that would spell probably the end of his life, meaning he'd live out his days in prison.
Manafort faces sentencing in D.C. next week for conspiracy against the U.S. and conspiracy to obstruct justice in witness tampering. As for Michael Cohen, President Trump's former attorney and fixer, he's suing the president and his organization, claiming the president owes him nearly $2 million in legal fees and costs. After days of infighting and near rebellion by rank-and-file Democrats, the House passes a bipartisan resolution to condemn anti-Semitism and hate.
I salute all of our members for demonstrating the courage to have this difficult conversation and for doing so in a spirit of great respect, disagreeing sometimes, but never questioning the patriotism or motivation of anyone with whom we serve.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi, but critics say the resolution was watered down and should have mentioned Congresswoman Ilhan Omar for her anti-Israeli statements, which prompted the resolution. And stocks fell for the fourth straight session as the European Central Bank unveils a plan to stimulate the faltering Eurozone economy. The Dow down 200 points. This is Fox News.
Shrimp and guacamole for Lent at Subway. The all-new shrimp and guacamole combines generous portions of whole shrimp and a spread of guacamole served on freshly baked bread, paired with vegetables cut fresh daily in restaurants and sauces that are sure to excite your taste buds. Hurry in, it's only available for a limited time. Other fresh Lenten flavors include the classic tuna or the mouth-watering greatness of our seafood sensation. Don't forget the Veggie Max, a delicious and tasty vegetarian patty. Visit any of our convenient locations today. At Subway, you make it what you want.
Top military brass apologized to Congress for the crisis in military family housing and say they will fix it.
Soul searching on every level here at the Pentagon. This scandal finally has the attention of Congress and the top military brass. Deplorable conditions such as toxic mold, lead, and rodents inside base housing from Camp Lejeune to Fort Belvoir, Fort Meade, and beyond. Angry senators demanded answers from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. The conditions inside the homes remained secret in part because the private landlords contracted by the military demanded some families sign non-disclosure agreements. It came out during the hearing that one property management team visited that same home 52 times and never got to the root of the problem. The military service chiefs are proposing a tenant bill of rights for all military families.
Fox's Jennifer Griffin. A federal judge in Maryland clears the way for the White House to roll out broad restrictions on transgender people serving in the military. The district rescinding a previous order barring the move. The ultimate decision, though, is still making its way through the courts. A Florida baseball team gets in on a running joke about the state.
It's an internet sensation. The meme and phrase Florida Man, a running gag on bizarre arrests involving individuals from the Sunshine State. The Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp, the Double-A minor league baseball affiliate of the Miami Marlins, will pay homage with Florida Man Night at their ballpark on July 26th. Now, during the game, the Jumbo Shrimp will break a bizarre Florida law every inning. Now, the team ran this promo last year with one fan taking it a bit too far by running onto the field naked. That Florida man was charged with lewd conduct and disorderly intoxication. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
And the SpaceX Crew Dragon spaceship will undock from the International Space Station about 2:30 Friday morning and then head back to Earth. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Experience the Take Care difference. Take Care members can count on accessing a high-quality, credentialed network of on-island providers, including the convenient one-stop FHP Health Center and urgent care, access to an extensive off-island network of providers, and the island's largest offering of free fitness classes and health education programs. You can count on Take Care to deliver comprehensive, accredited insurance coverage and quality health care when and where you need it. Take Care. Our island, your health plan. Learn more at takecareasia.com.
Attention homeowners, if you don't have a solar energy system on your roof from Micronesia Renewable Energy, now is the time to get one. MRE solar energy systems now come with battery storage for zero money down. This means that your home will have power even when the island power isn't available, like during power outages or during and after storms. The inconvenience of not having power for your home is a thing of the past. Don't be left in the dark. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE, the smarter choice.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thus saith the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution, a good place to start any conversation about the laws, the Constitution, social issues, etc. The Constitution of the United States is kind of the foundation upon which everything else in our country is built, and it pays us all to know a little bit about it and to protect those rights that the Constitution secures and protects for all of us. So that's one of the reasons that we start out with the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution. Another reason is that it gives me a chance to exercise my sarcasm gland and kind of make fun of Mr. Justice Antonin Scalia. May he rest in peace, a former justice of the United States Supreme Court. And I do that for a couple reasons. One, because Justice Scalia, although given his popularity with conservatives, perhaps is not as great as we might have thought if we examine some of the things that he's written. Two of the things that he's written, Heller versus District of Columbia versus Heller and McDonald versus Chicago, dealing with the Second Amendment, are classic examples where Mr. Justice Antonin Scalia was able to write an opinion or opinions holding that the Second Amendment applied in the District of Columbia, which is not a state, and that pursuant to the Second Amendment, everyone has a right to keep a firearm in his house for his own personal protection as an individual personal right. And somehow Mr. Justice Antonin Scalia was able to come up with those conclusions and disregard the use of the word militia at the beginning of the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, which is what you might think the Second Amendment is about, unless you happen to be Mr. Justice Antonin Scalia. So that's one of the reasons that, another reason that I start out with the Second Amendment. Third is by my sarcastically picking on a justice of the United States Supreme Court, it kind of sets the tone for the tall tales approach to the subjects that are important to all of us. There are very few, if any, sacred cows on tall tales. I'd like to say that when it comes to tall tales, we get into the unvarnished facts, truths, etc., and my opinions, which of course rise above those two things. So there is a certain degree of sarcasm and irreverence that's part of the tall tales mystique. And that's probably part of the reason that we command an international radio listening audience here, right, Real Joe Cruz?
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah, we got the Real Joe Cruz here in the control room, warming up for his time in the spotlight after the halftime show, when he will no longer be Real Joe Cruz, the producer of Tall Tales. He will be, for a moment, Real Joe Cruz, the scholar.
That's right.
So make sure you stay tuned. I know everybody's going to stay tuned for the big halftime show anyhow, but that'll come right after the halftime show. Well, today's little tidbit about the Second Amendment comes from that column called Bearing Arms, which is all about bearing arms and the Second Amendment and who's trying to do away with it. And it starts out like this: guns are a divisive issue. By now, anyone who doesn't know that has been paying attention to much of anything to do with the political landscape over the last year or so. However, it's important to remember that while we know that we can't trust all Republicans with our gun rights, some Democrats actually do support the Second Amendment. Shocking. While the party clearly demands loyalty, not everyone is interested in playing ball, particularly on gun rights. One who apparently didn't, a freshman representative from Maine, is now the target of an anti-gun effort to see him ousted. If you don't stick with the Democrat Party line, you are guilty of apostasy, and you may very well find yourself on AOC's list of Democrats who are going to be, as she says, primaried. In other words, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says that those Democrats who are not sufficiently leftist might find that she has put other Democrats up to run against those Democrats in primary elections. So I guess the saying is they only eat their own. But back to this article. A gun advocacy group plans to launch a $200,000 in digital ads targeting members of the U.S. House of Representatives, including Maine's newest congressman who voted last week against expanding private sale background checks. U.S. Representative Jared Golden. You know, that representative from Maine is probably going to be like gold to us, those of us who back the Second Amendment. He's a Democrat from Maine's 2nd District, and he voted against H.R. 8. A group called Every Town for Gun Safety, with support for another group called Moms Demand Action for Gun Safety in America, will focus on 7 members of the House who opposed H.R. 8. 4 Republicans, that's to be expected. In fact, you really don't need to know what they're for or against if they're Republicans. Good enough reason to oppose them. 4 Republicans and 2 Democrats, and their Facebook advertisements, which direct constituents to contact their elected representatives and voice their concerns. But for anti-gunners, it's irrelevant. You see, you're not supposed to do as your constituents want, but what your betters within the anti-gun movement would have you do. Your betters, folks like Nancy Pelosi and AOC and some of the bigwigs in the Democrat Party. They can't handle free thinking or anything of the sort. They want mindless automatons who will vote as they direct them. Now, every time we use the word they, we have to translate, right? We're not talking about one person for whom we know his sex. We're not using they in that sense. We're using they to mean more than one person. So it used to be so easy to deal with the word they. Everybody knew what it meant. But now every time you use the word they, you have to translate to make sure people understand what you're talking about. They, meaning the Democrats, want mindless automatons who will vote as they direct them. not the people who put them in office. The truth is Golden made the right call. If he was elected in a rural district, and the chances are he was elected by pro-gun voters who voted for the man, not the party, the last thing he should do if he wants more than a single term in Congress is toe that party line. That party isn't what got him elected, not really. It was the voters he's representing. To be fair to the Democratic Party, well, now that's a tough one. To be fair to the Democrat Party, they're making no judgment of targeting him. These are all liberal groups, but liberal and Democrat aren't synonymous. There's a big overlap, but not a one-to-one ratio. Still, the fact that anti-gun groups have decided to target this guy only makes me that much more interested in him. It's kind of the Barbra Streisand phenomenon, right? And then we go back to that old saying that the enemy of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. More than that, though, Democrats don't understand that their efforts may... Now, this sounds like something I would say. You know, when it comes to gun control, more than that, Democrats don't understand that their efforts may well backfire. Yeah. After all, I'm not alone in my thinking. Many who didn't support Golden in 2018 may well flock to his banner in 2020. After all, he's now made it clear that he's not beholden to Nancy Pelosi. Meanwhile, the left is eating itself as it battles over guns. And the final sentence, it's quite amusing, to be honest. Well, there are a lot of things about Democrats that are quite amusing. So that's the Second Amendment, and I think we'll go from there to Zemi Ikotny, and I do, yeah.
You might want to tilt the camera down a little bit.
I might want to what?
Tilt the camera down just a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
Because they might start calling us short tails.
Short tails. How's that? Is that better?
There. Now they can see your handsome face, sir.
Well, I don't know, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, thank you, Real Joe Cruz. Real Joe Cruz is an essential element here in Tall Tales. He's a guy that pushes the buttons, pulls the strings, levers, etc., saves me from embarrassing myself. Anyhow, what do we call this portion of the program, Real Joe?
Zemi Ikotny, otherwise Press the Meat.
Or...
Meet the Press.
Meet the Press. It's our backwards, multilingual play on words. What we do is we take a look at the editorials of our two daily newspapers. We parse them, digest them, autopsy them, analyze them, etc. And when we determine which of the two is better, that editorial is usually awarded the coveted Blue Star. And after I've awarded the Blue Star and held the winning editorial up to the camera like this so you can see it, if you listen closely, if you're anywhere in Tamuning, you could actually hear the champagne corks popping in the editorial boardroom of the winning newspaper. So we're going to make a little history with the Daily News editorial today. I've been pretty hard on the Daily News when, instead of running their own editorial, they just run something from USA Today. I would, if I wanted to read an editorial from USA Today, I know exactly how to do that, and I don't have to look at the Daily News to find it. So oftentimes the Daily News runs USA Today stuff. I think we may be dealing with a situation here where we have, you know, the old saying that if a dog bites a man, it's not news, but when a man bites a dog, it is news. We may be looking at that situation where a man bites a dog, because it may very well be that when the folks at the editorial board at the USA Today see the Daily News editorial, they'll run that in the USA Today, because it's sufficiently left-wing to pass muster with USA Today. Now, I see that I've got C. Mo Atgidun on the line, And Mo, if you can hang on just a second here. Well, I'll tell you what. Let me go to Mo Atgidun first, and then I'll come back to Zemi Ikotny. Good afternoon, Mo.
Yeah, good. Only reason I'm calling in while you discuss the news and the editorials is that I'm involved in fake news today. Fake news.
Fake news.
On the front page of the Post.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm ready to maybe people will come to my door and arrest me because of this news.
Is it the story dealing with marijuana and or cannabis, Mo?
Yes, that's exactly right. And here I am taking my time to give my testimony and humbleize myself because I've got a little bit of cancer and things like that. And I'm telling them that I am for recreational marijuana because I don't think we'll ever get the health marijuana bill passed because it's too hard. But the recreational marijuana is easy. It just says, okay, we can do it. And so that was my testimony. And the other thing, of course, that I was pretty upset about was they said I treat myself with cannabis, which I do not. That would be against the law. So, as a matter of fact, I haven't treated myself with cannabis probably for 40, 50 years, back in the good old college days.
Boy, you had a long illness there, huh, Mo?
It's been going on since 2000, but
if you've been self-medicating for 50 years, it's good that you survived.
No.
No? Is this fake news again, Mo?
Yeah, that's fake news. The news is, the not news is that I don't do it. I'm waiting for them to finally say it's legal, and then I can treat myself. And somehow they got it reversed and said I wasn't for recreational marijuana, and I do treat myself for the cancer probably daily. That's the implication. So what do I do, Mr. Tall Tales? Do I ask for a retraction, or should I give myself up?
Obviously, Mo, you've taken a gigantic step forward by bringing this incident of fake news to the attention of our international radio listening audience.
That's why I wanted to be on first.
And I suspect this was the Daily News that...
No. This was the Post.
Okay, it was the Post that ran this fake news dealing with Mo Cotton. So I suspect that if you were to sue the Guam Post, one of the things that the Post would advance in mitigation of damages is the fact that you corrected the record right here on Tall Tales.
Yes.
You put a stop to the fake news almost instantaneously, Mo. So you made a good step. Now, second, here's a little inside dope on the care and feeding of journalists, right? When a story runs in a newspaper and it contains a statement, any kind of a statement, when that issue is revisited, that statement may very well pop up in subsequent stories. So if you do write to the Post and say, hey, this is wrong, I want you to correct the record, they'll correct the record somewhere in the bottom of page 17 or something like that. And a lot of folks would say, well, is it really worth it? Because everybody saw the front page story, but nobody looks at page 17. And the answer to that question is, yes, it is worth it, and yes, it is recommended. Because if you don't do that, in the future, if your name comes up again, that same fake news may track itself back into the article, because the reporter who writes the latest story will go back to the earlier story and may pluck the fake news out of it because, well, it was in the paper, it must be correct. So you certainly want to write to the Post and show them the error of their ways, Mo.
Okay, so that's good advice, because I was just going to laugh it off this morning. As a matter of fact, I told my wife I'm not going to do anything. I think it's funny, but I'm not going to take the advice of my wife. I'm going to take the advice of Tall Tales.
It's usually difficult to go wrong taking the advice of Tall Tales. However, when it's Tall Tales versus your wife, I don't have that same amount of confidence because you only have to live with Tall Tales a couple hours a day on weekdays. Your wife is a little bit more permanent.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I will take your advice anyway, and I will do that tomorrow. I'm too tired to do it today. Had a hard day.
Okay, Mo. It's always good to talk to you, and good luck with that.
Thank you for allowing me to correct the fake news that was in today's paper.
Okay, well, we'll come back to the story, so you may be part of the, notwithstanding what I said about retractions, you may be part of the story when we get to that item on the card.
Okay.
Thanks, Mo.
I'm listening.
All right, so long. Okay, so so much for Mo Atgidun and fake news and the Post, but we'll come back to that. Now, going back to the editorial in the Daily News, I'm thinking perhaps I should write a letter to them and tell them to cancel their subscription to Kool-Aid because it appears that they've vigorously imbibed of the climate change Kool-Aid in the process of writing this editorial. Here it goes. Our view, do more than just mock the Green New Deal. That's a tall order for Tall Tales. A Green New Deal has been proposed to battle climate change, but what difference would it really make in flood-prone places like South Wilmington? The knives are definitely out for the Green New Deal. The sweeping plan to fight climate change has been called immoral, a socialist manifesto and the suggestion of Nazi Germany or Stalinist Russia. The resolution's progressive overreach makes it a ripe target. It calls for nothing less than a complete overhaul of the American economy with guarantees for jobs, high-quality health care, higher education that seem to go far beyond fighting global warming. I think there's also a provision in the Green New Deal that would repeal gravity if you happen to drop something that's fragile, that's dear to you. Potential government costs for infrastructure, research, and housing upgrades to reduce national greenhouse gas emissions to zero by a 10-year national mobilization are through the roof, requiring higher taxes or deficit spending. But the resolution has shown success. If nothing else, it has people talking about climate change, a true crisis facing the United States and the world. The public is growing impatient. The past 4 years were the warmest on record. 73% of Americans now believe that climate change is real, and 63%, as you were 69%, are worried about it. Well, I'm going to admit that I'm part of the 73%. I think that climate change is real. But I'll also point out it's nothing new. If you go back through historical records, the climate of the Earth has been, the one constant in the climate of the Earth is that it changes all the time. Back in Wisconsin, back where I came from, at one time there was a glacier a mile thick that covered that whole area. Kind of cold, right? But the glacier receded and it melted, etc. And if you examine historical records, we've had hot days, we've had hot times, we've had cold times, etc. The climate of the Earth is not static. So, okay, so the climate shows that we are dealing with more warm weather. That's perhaps the easy part of the equation. The harder part is what caused it. And I think if you ask the scientists, they'd tell you all kinds of things can cause it. Volcanic eruptions caused by earthquakes, sunspots, the unequal spin of the Earth on its axis, all kinds of things can cause climate change. I am not ready to trade in my 27-year-old car for a Prius because I have a guilty conscience about causing the earth to warm up. I know that driving a Prius is an easy way on wheels to do virtue signaling, because by driving a Prius, you show everybody that you're on the right side of global warming, right? But I'm not ready for that, and I would hold that this whole idea that the warming of the earth is caused by man and can be stopped by man if we embrace this foolishness of the Green New Deal. I'm not ready to sign up for that. I'm not even close. Okay, then the article goes on and the editorial goes on and talks about the Green New Deal. Last year, a landmark scientific report by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, warned that nations are not acting quickly enough to cut greenhouse gas emissions from industrial and agricultural processes. You know what the agricultural processes are, according to the Green New Deal, Real Joe Cruz? Cattle flatulence.
Why don't they just say farts, sir?
Well, it wouldn't sound quite as scientific, would it? Yeah, so I don't know what you would do to stop cattle flatulence. The Green New Dealers say, well, the thing to do is just don't eat any more meat. And burning of fossil fuels to avoid a temperature increase that will generate increasingly intense wildfires, storms, and droughts, as well as rising seas and mass migrations. Well, I'm surprised that anybody on the left side would be opposed to anything that causes a mass migration, because it would appear that the left wants nothing more than to have all of the American hemisphere, the people of the American hemisphere, south of the Rio Grande, move into the United States tomorrow. What would a more specific, realistic Green New Deal look like? Its features would include... Okay, we're going to come back to the Green New Deal after this break here.
The stations of Choice Broadcasting are celebrating April 2019 as National Earth Month with the return of our Upcycle Mascot Showdown. We've invited the public elementary schools to set the example and build their school mascots completely out of recyclable material. Stay tuned to our stations to see how you can vote for your favorite school this April. Celebrate Earth Month with our students in the 2019 Upcycle Mascot Showdown, brought to you by the Agania Shopping Center, Lolita Kamet from Remax Diamond Realty, Sylvan Learning Center, and the stations of Choice Broadcasting.
Save big. Save really big when you bundle up your insurance policies with Nanbo Insurance. Insure your home, auto, motorcycle, or business with Nanbo and enjoy great savings, up to 50%. When it comes to insuring your property, no one knows better than the company with over 50 years of service to the community. Don't compromise the things that matter to you most. Call Nanbo today at 477-9754 or visit nanbo.com for more information. Nanbo Insurance, serving you since 1968.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spittin' truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Okay, so this is what the Daily News editorial says. It says that the Green New Deal, the product of the legendary Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who holds a PhD in physics and meteorology from... No, I don't think she does. I think she's a college graduate. I know she was a bartender, and... one of the qualifications for being a bartender is you kind of have to be an expert on every subject, but you never let your expertise interfere with your agreeing with the customer. So perhaps that's AOC. But putting aside AOC's, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's rather over-the-top Green New Deal, this is what we need. A carbon tax high enough to level the playing field in power generation so green energy sources can gain traction. So we ought to tax Guam Power Authority because they burn fossil fuel, tax them perhaps to cause a triple increase in our power bills. This would make it easier for those who sell solar power to make their sales. That's what they're saying here. A recommitment to nuclear power. Now that's a strange one coming from the left. A recommitment to nuclear power, which generates 20% of the nation's energy without producing greenhouse gases. I agree with that, but you know, for how long was the left absolutely against nuclear power? Remaining in the Paris Climate Accord, global warming is a global problem that requires a global solution. Okay, and I'm sure when this editorial came out, the government in China said, you know, we've got to comply with those Paris Accords. We're just going to put our industrial development and our own pollution industry aside. And then government promoted, of course, this is important, government promoted research and development aimed at not just at curbing greenhouse gases, but also at adaptation to and mitigation of global warming. Now, the key words here are government-promoted research. You got to get the government into this thing as far as possible. Winding up, Republicans in the White House and Congress are having a grand old time mocking the Green New Deal. Well, you know, if you don't like Saturday Night Live, you could watch the AOC show and read the Green New Deal, because one is about as funny as the other. But critics owe this and future generations more than scorn. They have an obligation to put better ideas and solutions on the table. Now, there's something I got to go back to here. This outfit, the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Back before I went on my vacation, I had an item that quoted two people who either were members of that IPCC or were consultants there too. Both of whom said, you know, this isn't really about climate. What this is about is shifting wealth. It's about leveling the playing field. It's about dealing with people with the inequality in the world. So we're going to use this climate change mantra for the government to take over all kinds of dictatorial powers to bring about that change that the left so much favors, this utopian socialistic world that we hear so much about lately. So that's the Daily News editorial. I'll put that aside for a second. And then we go to the Post editorial. Focus should be on ensuring we don't run out of space at the landfill. Whether the government of Guam acknowledges it or not, there have been ample records and news clips to show it's been public for at least a few years that the government of Guam's landfill's 2 cells will run out of space within the next year. 2 years at most. Now, by way of historical background, we used to have a location called the Ordot Dump, which started out as a natural depression, as a hole in the ground. And going way back before the World War II, even the Navy used it as what in some places is politely called a sanitary landfill. But we call it the dump. We called it the Ordot Dump. And we kept using the Ordot Dump even though the national government, EPA, said, hey, your dump is leaking leachate into the Longfit River, and this violates the Clean Water Act. You guys got to stop doing that. And, you know, we hemmed and hawed and gnashed our teeth and wrung our hands and did really absolutely nothing about it for a long, long time until finally the Chief Judge of the United States District Court for Guam, Francis Tydenko Gatewood, appointed a receiver and gave that receiver the necessary power to close down the ORDOT dump and to create a landfill in La Zone down south over a certain amount of objection and a certain amount of controversy. And the way that one works is 2 holes were dug in the ground. They are lined with some sort of a impervious liner with a means of draining off the leachate and liberating the methane gas that's generated, et cetera. So when that stuff goes in, when the trash goes into those cells, either one of them, it's not going to be a problem as far as polluting water or the air or anything else. But the cells are almost full. And the receiver has told us, you guys got to build another cell down there because we're running out of space. Now, in the meantime, we incur a certain amount of expense closing the old ORDOT dump, which for Tall Tales purposes has been rechristened. It's no longer the ORDOT dump. It is now known as Mount Trashmore. So if you've ever, you can see it from different places on the island. It is probably one of the more significant man-made features on the island. It's right up there with the Great Pyramids in Egypt. You know, it's a pyramidal-shaped object that started out as a hole in the ground and wound up as a pyramid, probably 300 feet above the ground. So that's the background here. And this reminder was again mentioned Wednesday. Quote, we're looking at cells 1 and 2 being at capacity somewhere between the summer of 2020 and 2021, noted Chase Anderson, a representative of the federal court-appointed solid waste management receiver Gershman, Brickner, and Bratton. The landfill was built to house a total of 11 cells, but only 2 cells were built with a plan to build more later. Adding to the sense of urgency, GovGuam would need 2 dry seasons to build new landfill cells. Each cell has been estimated to cost upward of $20 million. The construction time frame is also going to be a challenge with Guam's ongoing labor shortage. GovGuam is running out of time. Anderson said during Wednesday's court order visit to the Lizon landfill that reminders of the need for more landfill cells have been made each year since 2013 as part of the receiver's reports to the court. There have been court hearings and media statements by the receiver about the same issue for the past few years. Okay, so the receiver, this guy Anderson, cut right to the chase. What's his name, real Joe Cruz?
Anderson?
Chase Anderson, yeah. Oh. He cut right to the chase, yeah. I guess this guy doesn't beat around the bush much. Anyhow, Chase Anderson says, we've been telling you this since 2013. Then back to the editorial. Instead of acknowledging the pressing deadline, Guam Solid Waste Authority Board Chairman Andrew Gale called out Anderson before a federal judge, saying, not each of those reports said that. So he's quibbling about when these warnings occurred. Anderson countered, each of those reports said that. Gale responded, no, only the last report said that. So we're talking about which report said you got to build another cell. The last thing GSWA needs to do is deflect. Essentially, the deadline is closing in before the landfill overflows, or we no longer have the space to dump all of the island's trash. Since GovGuam and the Guam Solid Waste Authority have been pressing to get the receiver out of the picture, they have argued so for years in court. This challenge will now be completely in the hands of local decision makers in a matter of months. When the receivership ends, District Court Judge Francis Tydinkle Gatewood will no longer watch over the solid waste management on Guam, like a hawk. So Francis Gatewood has been watching this whole matter like a hawk. Maybe the receivership's exit will let GSWA and GovGuam rise to the challenge to do things the right way, even without oversight. But the first step should be for the people in charge to acknowledge the problem has existed for a while. After the acknowledgement, hopefully the problem solving begins. So much for the landfill, and I see I've got a call from Kellis. Before I pick up Kellis's call, I'm going to say something that may generate a little controversy, and that is that, you know, given that a new cell costs $20 million and that we continue, if we're not good at producing anything else here in Guam, we're really good at producing trash. So maybe it's time to look again at the idea of waste energy. Maybe that maybe the trash could be burned, even if it didn't generate electricity. I don't know exactly what the science is on that subject, but it may be time to take a look at it. So let me go here to Kellis and see what Kellis is usually pretty informative. What can you tell us, Kellis?
Well, what I was just thinking about is, you know, when they finally got the final, you have to close the dump or, you know, cats and dogs will start living in sin. Didn't it take them like 10 years or so to actually and a court order to close it? I think what GovGuam is looking at is, you know, once they start saying we have to close the dump, they got like 10 years.
Well, you mean
so
they
10
would
years on these two cells at least, maybe 15. Because it's like, I don't think it's anywhere near 300 feet in the air yet.
So what you're saying is that you don't think the cells are actually that near capacity?
In the heart and in the eyes of the government of Guam, which I mean is always does things to the best of its ability and to the most cost efficiency of their personnel, I think that they see that they have another 10 or 12 years on these two cells before basically, and then you're going to have the courts come in and mandate that they absolutely have to be closed.
Now, this 10 or 12 years that you think the government might use, do you think that's an informed judgment or just governmental inertia?
In judgment.
I'm sorry, Kellis, my question is, do you think it's an informed judgment or just a case of governmental inertia?
Exactly. Government inertia. In other words, GovGuam, for example, never saw an employee it didn't need, but it never saw any, you know, work that could not be put off for another administration or another, you know, legislature or another. But, you know, it's more important to employ people than to actually have them working.
So I think what you're saying is that if the government of Guam were a person, it never saw a can it couldn't kick down the street, right?
It would never, yeah, it couldn't do it until, you know. But because the thing is, like, what I see, like, they were just talking about, you know, GovGuam employees needing to have access to this other hospital. And it was such a dire, you know, so they're willing to raise the taxes on everyone else. But, you know, I don't see that. I could understand if GovGuam employed 75% of the working population on Guam. But I don't think they're anywhere near that.
Well,
you have all these other industries that are, you know, they're not getting the benefit of. I mean, I think if the Hilton, for example, decided that they wanted to increase the benefits for their employees and have just GovGuam employees pay the additional $5 a month, you know what I'm saying?
Ray Gibson on his show pointed out that not everybody on the island works for the government of Guam, which seems to be the mindset of the legislature and the governor on this particular issue. We got to take care of our people, all of whom work for the government of Guam, right?
Yes. Well, because if they don't work for the government of Guam, they know somebody that works for the government of Guam, and if you sit there and take one of their employees out from there, then the different. Even if I don't work for Gov Guam, I'm going to remember which senator or which governor fired my cousin's nephew's brother's best friend.
I got you. I hear what you're saying, Kellis.
But yeah, so I honestly think that like I said, the landfill, it's not to a point where the federal courts are going to come in and mandate that it's so that Gov Guam says we still have time.
Yeah.
But what I fail to understand is this receiver cost the government of Guam an awful lot of money, did it not?
It really did, and it's money that was wasted. If we had done what we should have done in a timely fashion, we could have saved millions of dollars.
Yeah, but so this is what I'm saying. Gov Guam, why spend $100 now when I can spend $5,000 2 years from now for the exact same thing?
Interesting point, Kellis.
Okay, I got to go.
Thanks for calling in, and I got a break coming up here, and when I come back from the break, I have a rare treat for our international radio listening audience. I have someone online who has been a host of Tall Tales, someone other than me, so hang on for that. Daryl will be with you right after the break.
There's a reason every day a Guam homeowner is getting a solar system installed by Micronesia Renewable Energy. It's because MRE is the most trusted name in solar. With more solar energy solutions than any other solar company on island, homeowners have a choice to go solar for zero money down or take the path to ownership. Whichever way, it keeps our skies blue and your pockets green. And with the most experienced solar technicians and an energy production guarantee, there are no worries. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE, the smarter choice.
Family Finance has been serving the people of Guam since 1959, and they'll continue to be there for you in the years to come. Whether you're looking to get a personal loan for that summer vacation or paying off those long overdue bills, Family Finance has got you covered. Apply for a personal loan from $1,000 up to $3,600 by calling Family Finance in Agutya at 475-4545, Upper Tumon at 647-5626, or in Dededo 633-4473. Family Finance, serving the people of Guam since 1959.
So technically we're still in the Demi-Cotney portion of the program, but the editorial on the landfill has drawn a certain amount of attention to itself. The comments relating to which I eagerly anticipate from a temporary host of Tall Tales named Daryl Taggarty. So Daryl, what can you tell us?
Well, I'm really impressed by this. I'm going to assume, which is a big assumption, that both parties, both the receiver and the GSWA board, the ladies in waiting there, are telling the truth about what they know and when did they know it. But this is seems that because we're already in the dry season and the government of Guam cannot go through a procurement process in time to get this on the road, that this is a really good reason, whether it's intentional or not, for the receiver to keep the contract under the aegis of the court until the next cell is constructed, or at least contracted out, because it won't happen under the government of Guam if we have to wait until the transition is completed. And the second point I want to make is that the landfill, because of the interest of the military in getting that landfill, the third cell built, and this was part of a story that came out several days back, the interest of the military in having that landfill continue means that it should be qualified for H-2B workers from the companies that bid on it.
That seems right, Daryl. That's
a
good point.
And it might have been intentional. Maybe Chief Anderson soft pedaled the point the third cell being needed, or he's fudging the dates when that the second cell will be full. He could be, but we won't know that if we're going to sit and wrangle and spit over it. The judge is going to have to make a decision, and I'm pretty sure that this kind of an issue is not going to make her feel comfortable with handing this over to the government of Guam at this point in time. And it's just another example of where, in spite of putting our best foot forward, it's just not quite good enough. We've got to have people who are really much more on the ball with the technical requirements and the practical requirements and the political requirements of the transition. And the board doesn't seem, the GovGuam board doesn't seem to be really prepared to tackle this. If everything had gone forward with with new management and really heads up with the regulations and all that had happened according to the pace that was anticipated at the beginning, then we would have already had a general manager in place who would have put out the bid package if it was technically required. But now we have no way of knowing because it's caught up in this he said, she said stuff. And so it's just I'm not even going to say we're victimized again. It is a matter of a federal receivership doing a better job at it than we do.
Which doesn't augur well for those of us, for those who think that an independent Guam would be better for everyone on the island. It's sad to say that that federal hammer sometimes is what's needed to pound things into place here, Daryl.
Well, it really, even without the proponents for an independent Guam, we can't even seem to get out of our own way with the current political leadership that we put in, that we have confidence in, that we say we put these people in. And yes, we support the people that they chose to head up these boards and commissions and agencies, and and the ones who deserve the Hay study raise and the higher salaries for doing such a good job. We're just being taken for a ride, and I'm just so tired of it.
Well,
so tired of it.
This may not sit too well with you, Daryl, but with respect to the dump, again, I can blame it on Democrats because...
I'll laugh. That's okay.
Okay. Well, Senator Tom Atta introduced a bill that would have put the supervision of the landfill under the Consolidated Commission for Utilities, which I thought was a really good idea. The CCU is up, running, has a staff. It's dealt with a couple of other utilities. I've been a fan of the CCU.
And the PUC.
The CCU from the time it started, because our utilities, our power and water, are so much better since they took over than they were before that. So you had something that was already in place that you didn't have to go out and kind of pull yourself up by your own bootstraps to take on something as hard as dealing with this with the landfill. So that bill, when it hit the floor, was amended by, may he rest in peace, Senator Ben Pangilinan, who took it away from the CCU, amended the bill, and created a new board. So you got a new board, no staff, an extremely difficult proposition before it, the federal receiver, et cetera. It's no private business would ever take it on like that. So anyhow, Daryl, as you know, that big halftime show is coming up right now, so thanks for calling.
Yeah, thank you for being there, Bob.
Yes, sir. So the big halftime show, we'll be right back after that, and I will award the coveted Blue Star then.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A watered-down resolution. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. The House passes a bipartisan resolution condemning anti-Semitism and hate. But critics say it does not go far enough because it fails to mention the Muslim congresswoman whose anti-Israel statements spurred the action.
Republicans, including one of two Jewish Republicans, took to the House floor to address Congresswoman Ilhan Omar.
I believe that she knows exactly what she's doing. It is an American value, by the way, to have reasonable, legitimate criticism of a government, whether it be the U.S. government, Israel, or any other government. It is not an American value, though, to be hurling anti-Semitic rhetoric.
And this resolution does not mention Congresswoman Ilhan Omar by name, though some Republicans and Democrats believe that it should.
Fox's David Spunt. Critics also blasting the sentence for President Trump's former campaign chairman Paul Manafort, saying that he's getting off easy for tax and bank fraud. A judge sentencing him Thursday to less than 4 years in prison.
Paul Manafort made his appearance in court to hear that and did not look well, according to our courtroom producers who were inside. He came in on a wheelchair, literally had to lift each leg out of the wheelchair to be seated in the courtroom. He also carried a cane. He said in the judge before the sentencing was handed down, quote, "To say that I am humiliated and ashamed would be a gross understatement."
Fox's Doug McElway. Another big avalanche closes a Colorado highway, burying 3 vehicles. State Patrol says no one was hurt in the third major slide on Thursday. It covers State Highway 91 about 1 mile south of the Copper Mountain ski area. Another slide earlier ruptured a natural gas line, cutting off gas to a wastewater treatment plant and a gas station. The Arapahoe Basin ski area says it will have delayed openings on Friday because of avalanche danger. This is Fox News.
The stations of Choice Broadcasting are celebrating April 2019 as National Earth Month with the return of our Upcycle Mascot Showdown. We've invited the public elementary schools to set the example and build their school mascots completely out of recyclable material. Stay tuned to our stations to see how you can vote for your favorite school this April. Celebrate Earth Month with our students in the 2019 Upcycle Mascot Showdown, brought to you by the Agana Shopping Center, Lolita Kamet from Remax Diamond Realty, Sylvan Learning Center, and the stations of Choice Broadcasting.
Save big. Save really big when you bundle up your insurance policies with Nanbo Insurance. Insure your home, auto, motorcycle, or business with Nanbo and enjoy great savings, up to 50%. When it comes to insuring your property, no one knows better than the company with over 50 years of service to the community. Don't compromise the things that matter to you most. Call Nanbo today at 477-9754 or visit nanbo.com for more information. Nanbo Insurance, serving you since 1968.
A man wanted in Illinois for allegedly gunning down a deputy Thursday faces first-degree murder charges. Police arresting Floyd Brown after a high-speed chase and a 6-hour standoff. Rockford Police Chief Dan O'Shea says Brown shot a deputy serving a warrant for his arrest.
A McHenry County Deputy Sheriff sworn in as a Special Deputy U.S. Marshal assigned to the U.S. Marshals Task Force was struck by gunfire outside the hotel. Deputy Jacob Keltner from McHenry County was transported to a hospital in critical condition, where he was later pronounced deceased.
Police say that Brown also shot and injured a woman at the hotel. In Florida, a jury convicts a police officer for the shooting death of a stranded black driver. Nouman Raja faces life in prison for killing Corey Jones in 2015. Chicago police say they've launched an internal investigation into leaks in the Jussie Smollett case, who claimed he was the victim of a hate crime.
Chicago police starting an investigation, tasking their chief of detectives with finding the source of the leaks. Police sending a statement saying a lot of the information out there was inaccurate and that they are looking at their vulnerabilities.
Dakari Turner with Fox 32 in Chicago. Police subsequently charged Smollett with staging the attack in January and filing a false police report. And a federal judge tosses out the lawsuit against President Trump filed by adult entertainer Stormy Daniels. The judge calling her suit to tear up the hush money settlement irrelevant, because the president agreed not to penalize Daniels for violating the $130,000 non-disclosure agreement. Daniels claims that she had an affair with Trump years ago, a fact that he says never happened. And stocks down for the fourth straight session. The Dow slid 200 points, the Nasdaq down 84. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Helen Keller once said, "Blindness separates us from things, but deafness separates us from people." At Ross Hearing Aids, it's their mission to keep you connected to the moments and the people that matter most in your life. Hearing aid technology has never been better, so schedule your complimentary hearing consultation today. Call Ross Hearing Aids, 637-HEAR, 637-4327. You should hear what you're missing.
I love you, Daddy.
How's your hearing?
Okay, I think it's coming up soon.
Yeah, we're on Route 1 and near the airport intersection, right?
There, see it? What's the keyword? Look for the keyword.
Check out the Vantage digital billboard and reap the rewards. Catch the keyword on the screen and get a free Americano or tea with menu purchase when you mention the keyword at your next visit to the Hive. Conditions may apply.
Did you see it?
You got it. I got it. You just focus on driving.
Take advantage today and take a look at Vantage Advertising's digital billboard located on Route 1 at the airport intersection.
What a great show. I don't know how you do it every day, Real Joe Cruz, to coordinate all of those events and during that time period, the marching band, the cheerleaders, the synchronized card sections, and the grandstand. Good job, Real Joe
Thank you.
Cruz.
It's quite the undertaking, sir, but I'll do it every single day for Tall Tales.
I think I can speak for our international radio listening audience when I say everyone appreciates it. Okay, so it's grading time. It's judgment time. I've got to decide which of the two editorials gets the coveted blue star. Could we have a drum roll, please, Real Joe Cruz? And the coveted blue star goes to the Guam Post. And a nicely done editorial, a model by which other editorial writers might use as a template. The editorial tackled an important issue, an issue that's important to everybody in the community. It laid out the facts, it stated the issue, it held people accountable, and there was a call to action. Right on point. Now, the Daily News, not so much. The Daily News ran something that would fit well into the editorial page of USA Today. So they're not going to get the coveted blue star, but I am going to give them a grade. And I'm going to hold it up, and I hope you can see it. The Daily News gets the AOC award. So I suspect that whoever reads the newspapers to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez will recommend this as a great editorial because it suggests that there is some merit in the silly New Deal that she put forth. Okay, so much for Demi Ekotny for today. And I think it's probably time that we greeted the folks that found their way back to Tall Tales again today, really.
Welcome back.
So we got Ishmael Velez here giving us a thumbs up. And let's see who else we got. And Ishmael says, a well-regulated, not intoxicated, not high militia. Perhaps he's commenting on the bill that had a public hearing yesterday. Albert Eliasson, Semper Fi Albert, says present and fairly attentive. Okay, can't ask for more than that. And then we've got Ishmael, who chimes in behind Albert and says, and not high. And then Ishmael says, what do you mean, quote, they, close quote, people? I may have to explain this once again. English used to be relatively easy for those for whom it was a mother tongue. If you were referring to yourself, the pronoun was I or me or mine. If you were referring to someone else that you were talking to, it was you or your. And if you're talking about a third person, just one third person, it was he or she. And if it were more than one third person, then the appropriate pronoun would be they. But in George Orwell fashion, if you ever read 1984, we are reconfiguring the English language to help people get their minds properly bent to handle the new enforced pretending that seems to be so important nowadays. And in order to do that, we have bent the third person pronoun, which used to be he or she, and we now are told that we must use the word they. So there are times when that perhaps is handy when we don't know if if that third person is a he or a she. But the orthodox rule now is that even if you know that the person that you're talking about has an X chromosome and a Y chromosome, that is that he is a man, if you're not subject to any of the enforced pretending that's so important nowadays, it would be impolite to refer to that man as he. I saw him yesterday and he spoke with me. Now you have to say, I saw them yesterday, and they spoke to me. I covered this a little bit recently with respect to the California legislature, where a Democrat state senator announces using he, she pronouns will be banned during public hearings. California knows no bounds when it comes to radical LGBT activism. On Thursday, State Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Hannah Jackson announced that only gender-neutral pronouns will be permitted during committee hearings. Our first order of business is to approve committee rules. I'd like to note, and respecting the fact that we are now state recognizing the non-binary designation of gender, he and she, we are now merging them so we are using what my grammar teacher would have had a heart attack over. We are using the phrase they. Well, they is not a phrase, it's a word. And replacing other designations, so it's general neutral designation they, announced the Democrat. Basically, that's the primary reforms. And then she goes on to say, in the spirit of gender neutrality, the rules for this committee, we now designate the chair as they, Jackson said. The world is a different place. My grammar teacher is long gone, and we won't be hearing from her, the senator noted before correcting herself, from them. Absolute and complete silliness. But it's the kind of pretending that's being forced on us at every turn, Ishmael. So if I were to say, yes, Ishmael had a good post on Facebook today, if I wanted to be politically correct, I'd have to say they usually do a good job of posting, even though I know exactly who you are and I know that you're a man. So that's why I say that when we use the word they nowadays, you can't take it for the meaning that we've all known ever since we learned how to use the English language. Now the word they has to be translated so that we know for sure what it is that we are talking about. So that's the kind of the explanation there, Ismail. You asked me what time it was, and I told you how to build a complicated grandfather clock. My bad. Tedo's here and says prayers and love to you, Mo. And Alex Afflegui, well regulated, Uncle Bob. He's talking about the militia. And Tedo, again, our leaders got to Fatmata, the opiate epidemic on Guam. It's taken 2 generations of our people. And I agree. And we have Tom Van Engen. I agree with you. And in our twisted world, you and I are called climate deniers because we don't drink the Kool-Aid. It's a giant hoax. Keep telling it, Bob. I will. So here's the word on this whole man-caused global warming initiative that the left is pushing on us. Are you ready for this? It's a hoax. Okay, thanks for helping me with my script there. Okay, then we got Rico Blancaflor. Good afternoon, Bob. It's always a good afternoon when you're with us, Rico. Thanks for joining us today. Juanita Macha is clapping, and so are Lynn Vince, Bora Polino. Tessie Pareda, Afade, and welcome back, Tall Tales. Hey, Tessie, it's really good to be back. It's always fun to travel, but it's always really, really good to get home. And then Daryl Taggarty, point taken on Ben Pangilinan. That was with respect to my analysis of the solid waste operation being under the CCU. But I don't agree on CCU. Their decisions must pass scrutiny of the Public Utilities Commission, equivalent to federal receiver. We need PUC level staff muscle at a part-time legislature. No more elected aristocracy deflecting responsibility. Well, I certainly agree with the last part of your comment, Daryl. Until we have a part-time legislature, we're going to keep on stumbling in the way that Kellis so aptly described earlier in the program. But having a PUC riding herd on the CCU, I see as a good thing if we're talking about a utility, which the Solid Waste Authority is. Okay, so let's see. I've got Chuck on the line. Chuck, what can you tell us?
Good afternoon, Senator. Anyway, when you were speaking about the opioid epidemic that somebody was talking about on Facebook, I would just like to know if you knew about any laws regulating the prescription drugs itself, like from a personal point of view, right? I took care of my mom. She was under hospice care until she passed away, and she had a number of prescription drugs that were given to her. Upon her passing away, I took all of those prescription drugs and returned it back to Naval Hospital, which were where they were originally prescribed for her. So my thing is this regulated at all? Like with hospice care going on and the drugs that are there, is that anything being done to regulate that? Because that, to me, seems to be something that nobody talked to me about. I just took it upon my own initiative to take care of that. And
Yeah.
That's all I have to say, sir.
Well, this is what I know about it, Chuck. The Drug Enforcement Administration has a system that's designed where everyone who prescribes, who has the chit that allows them to prescribe these drugs, has to log into a system so that a person can't go to more than one pharmacy to get the same controlled substance. Now, you are highlighting something different, and that is that the drugs have been legally prescribed, but the person who needs the drugs has passed away. What should happen to the drugs then? I don't think there's any means of tracking those drugs. I would commend you on your good citizenship, but I don't think there's any system in place that would handle that.
Right, and I'm sure some of those drugs are getting on the black market here and being sold, and just compounding our drug epidemic that we're facing, no matter what drug it might be. So that might be just something maybe the lawmakers can look into, and hopefully maybe there can be some sort of regulations put in place for that. That's all I have to say, sir.
Well, thanks a lot, Chuck. Good call. And Chuck has a good idea. If the legislature ever gets done legalizing that which is illegal, whether you want to call it marijuana or cannabis, maybe they could attend to something like Chuck's suggestion, which is a good one. Domingo, what can you tell me?
Afternoon, Bob. Welcome back.
It's good to be home, Domingo. Thank you.
I want to thank you for bringing up that the little tidbit about the pronoun, he, she, they, them. It's getting really confusing, and, I am an advocate for equal rights, but I believe in the world that we're living today, I think we're getting just a little bit too sensitive and too politically correct. That is way beyond basic rights now. Now it is just becoming too confusing. But I do have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
All right. So I believe, if I understand it correctly, that you served in our great country's military in the Marines.
That's correct.
And if I also understand it, that ships are referred to as female, as she.
Correct.
So if this type of legislation go through, do we refer to these ships as them or they, as opposed to she or it? Now it's just more confusing.
Well, I suspect that up until now that wouldn't have been the case, but since you let that cat out of the bag, Domingo, that'll be the next thing that the left wants us to do, to say that the Ronald Reagan pulled into port, and they are a really nice aircraft carrier.
Again, it's just, I believe that if we let us just focus on the basic rights as opposed to this gender identity thing. I mean, I do want to be, how do I say it? I do want to be cognizant. I do want to recognize people's feelings. But, man, this I believe, is going way beyond ridiculousness. That's just my point. And Bob, again, I just want to welcome you back. And thank you for putting a smile on my face because I thought that thing what's going on in California is crazy.
Thanks, Domingo. Thanks for calling in. So that's where we are with they and them and the English language. And, the way things are now, we're all supposed to be very tolerant. We're supposed to tolerate all kinds of things that violates our own concept of common sense, that a person who is born a male can somehow become a female later on in life, or vice versa, or that two people of the same sex can actually enter into a marriage. We're supposed to pretend that this is all logical and reasonable, and it's really always should have been that way. We just figured it out here in the last few years. And the whole linguistic twisting, the they instead of he or she, is part of it all. So we're supposed to be tolerant of all these things. So the toleration is supposed to extend to everything except for those who point out that we're tolerating things that should never be tolerated. And, of course, that attitude is beyond tolerance. That attitude cannot be tolerated. So the person who has who comes along with a really screwy theory is the person who is righteous, and anyone who says, yeah, that's screwy, it doesn't make any sense, turns out to be the villain the way we're set up nowadays. And, of course, our society is all about victims and villains. So, the identity politics setup, everyone is well advised to fit himself into some kind of identity group and then say, I'm in an identity group that has been marginalized, victimized, etc., by some other group, and therefore I'm entitled to certain things that I haven't earned on my own merit. So when you break it all down into identity groups, I suppose I feel personally aggrieved because I'm in an identity group that has absolutely nothing going for it. Here I am, an old, which is bad, ask AOC. Here I am, an old white guy, Christian, married to someone of the opposite sex. It probably doesn't get any grimmer than that. I don't have anything going for me at all when it comes to identity politics. I'm not going to sign up for this, and I'm not going to pander to it. And I'm going to, as it is possible, I will continue to try to show that the emperor is not wearing some really sheer, well-designed new clothes. The emperor is marching through the streets buck naked. Anyhow, so much for that. Back to the card. We finished with Zemi Ikotny, and now it's time for the card. And as I mentioned, I've got some interesting things on the card. I've got Howard Hemsing versus Paul Zerzan. I've got Clint versus Zerzan. I've got Rory versus Mike Phillips. I've got Justice Democrats versus Pelosi. I've got Social Justice Warriors versus Non-Pretenders. And in parentheses, pigs on two legs turn on each other. Now, to understand that, you would have had to have read the book Animal Farm, which I'm sure you have read, right, Real Joe Cruz?
I don't recall, sir.
Yeah, well, if you had,
that's a popular book.
That's your assignment for tomorrow.
Animal Farm.
Animal Farm, yeah.
I saw Animal House on TV.
Doesn't count.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, I just reminded myself, before I get into the card, I skipped over. I know you're sitting there wondering, what the heck happened? I had my big chance here, and Bob's skipping over it.
Oh, man, I was hoping you wouldn't remember.
All right, so without further ado, we now turn to the Real Joe Cruz Scholar. So yesterday I had 3 really hard questions for the Real Joe Cruz, which he handled quite nicely. As an example, I said, Real Joe Cruz, where was the Declaration of Independence signed? And the Real Joe Cruz came back instantly with the answer, at the bottom. So here's your next question, Real Joe Cruz. What is the main reason for divorce?
Marriage.
Yeah.
Marriage is the main reason for divorce.
Okay. If people didn't get married, they wouldn't need to get divorced.
Absolutely.
All right. And in school, what is the main reason for failure?
Exams?
Good call, Real Joe Cruz.
All right. I'm good at this.
I imagine you passed a lot of them yourself, given your ability to handle these questions.
I believe so, but I never let my education or my schooling get in the way of my education, sir.
Okay. Okay, Real Joe Cruz, what can you never eat for breakfast?
Lunch and dinner.
I don't know how you do it. Such a font of wisdom.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll come back to Real Joe Cruz, the intellectual, on Monday's Tall Tales. So I mentioned some of the things, and then things I didn't get to yesterday were Baker versus they. It deals with, you know, whether you can, if you were a baker, can you not bake a cake for a social justice warrior? And in this case, the baker won. But maybe we can get to that later. And I have on yesterday's card, the Democrats versus the truth. And that's pretty easy. I'll just explain it. The Republican National Convention next year will be held in Milwaukee, of all places. And, you know, the national conventions of the parties are very good TV, really, really important TV. Good advertising opportunities, a real gold mine for anybody in the media business. Well, the Democrats have announced that they're not going to allow Fox News to cover the Democrat convention. And that's why I labeled this one on the card, Democrats versus the truth. They wouldn't want some some snotty conservatives with microphones in their hands telling the truth about what's going on at their convention. So I can see where they're coming from. And then I also had tax versus Western Union, and this comes from a column by a guy named Bart Stinson that I've mentioned before. A very interesting revenue possibility that if we can't, we won't get to it today, but I'll get to it on Monday. So we're going to come back from the seventh inning stretch with Howard versus Paul Zerzan.
Attention homeowners, if you don't have a solar energy system on your roof from Micronesia Renewable Energy, now is the time to get one. MRE solar energy systems now come with battery storage for zero money down. This means that your home will have power even when the island power isn't available, like during power outages or during and after storms. The inconvenience of not having power for your home is a thing of the past. Don't be left in the dark. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE, the smarter choice.
You know, Real Joe Cruz, the old seventh inning stretch just isn't the same anymore. Now that Jack Haddock doesn't suit up and play the game.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah. I guess he's playing for the Chamorro Land Trust Commission right now. And I expect that if that's the team he's playing for, they're not looking for a really good ball player. They're looking for someone who will drop the ball at the right time. Yeah, I hope I didn't strike out on that one. Yeah, and actually, you know, when it comes to a really hard decision, the guy that holds Jack's position he can't step in and make the decision. He has to balk. So I don't know, maybe it's a good thing that Jack doesn't suit up anymore. Maybe he'd bring some of that Chamorro Land Trust Commission operation with him to Tall Tales. Okay, so Howard Hemsing versus Paul Zerzan. There was a hearing at the legislature yesterday dealing with Clint's Bill 32-35 called the Cannabis Industry Act. And there's a lot to be said about the substance of the bill. If we were to build cases dealing with the efficacy or lack thereof of either cannabis or marijuana, it wouldn't be that hard to do. I've read a lot of stuff that says, you know, this whole legalizing cannabis thing is not really that good of a deal. It causes a lot of problems. But we have a lot of other people who would say, no, that's, you know, cannabis is a wonderful thing. It cures everything from snake bite to the common cold, and we could make a lot of money off it, et cetera, et cetera. So no matter how persuasive the argument someone brings forward, probably not going to change very many minds on the subject. So I look at what happened at the hearing yesterday as a form of sort of raucous entertainment. And perhaps that's because of the subject matter that the bill deals with. I have pointed out on many occasions that to manufacture, grow, sell, distribute, etc., marijuana is against the law. It's against national law. Marijuana is a Schedule I controlled substance. So that means that somebody's determined that it has no useful purpose. My rap has always been that maybe it does, but we won't be able to find out if it's Schedule I. So maybe it should be scheduled somewhere where appropriate research could be conducted to see if it has any medicinal properties. And if it does, then, you know, we've got a Food and Drug Administration. We're pretty good at regulating drugs in the United States and the regulating the manufacture, sale, etc. of drugs, and that would be the way to go with it. And if that's the case, fine, let's have medicinal marijuana. On the other hand, given the problems that our society has right now, I don't see that the society, the public, would be well served by legitimatizing another mind-altering drug. We had, people would point out, well, marijuana is no worse than alcohol. Well, that's true. That's not a very powerful argument, is it? So my sense is if there is a medicinal purpose for it, fine. Let's deal with it like we deal with medicine. But I can't see that we're gaining anything by legalizing recreational marijuana, which is what this bill does. Now, of course, there's the argument, yeah, but, the tax revenue that would be generated. Well, all we're doing is taxing the same old group. We're taxing our local population. So we don't have to have marijuana. If we want to raise the taxes, we don't need to have marijuana to do that. We found that out with the gross receipts tax. All you need is some ink on paper. You don't have to introduce something into the community that a lot of people think would have a harmful effect on the community. There is the possibility that it would have an adverse impact on tourism, etc. But anyhow, the things that I thought were pretty interesting yesterday, I'm going to read from the PNC coverage. Sparks were ignited early on when Paul Zerzan, educator and opponent of Bill 32, got into a disagreement with Rigel on statistics produced by studies on the impact of cannabis performed in the state of Colorado. Zerzan's impassioned testimony came to a boiling point as he was weeded out of the public hearing for repeatedly shouting at the senator who was attempting to respond to him. Once again, sounds like something I would have said. Zerzan was weeded out of the public hearing. A public hearing that dealt with the legalization of weed, right? So he was weeded out. As Zerzan was escorted out, he accused the senator of being high, telling the senator, "You're a liar and you're high on drugs. Look at your red eyes." Rigel kept his composure, however. He asked that Zerzan be removed for his inability to hold a civil discussion. Perhaps Mr. Zerzan is under the influence of something that is causing him to act out, the senator quipped. So that particular dialogue right there kind of highlights what we're dealing with. If you want to diss somebody, say, hey, you're obviously high on that drug yourself. Not like taking, say, vitamin C. I notice you got rid of your cold. I guess you've been taking vitamin C. The drama, like the joint, was passed around the argument with a potent display of courage from one of the supporters of Bill 35. Courage of one of the supporters. Howard Hemsley, also known as Margariti Roberto. I don't know about this Roberto stuff, I kind of take issue with that. Margariti Roberto stunned those present at this afternoon's public hearing when he produced 3 bags of cannabis, waved them in the air while saying, "Guahaquini, $50 bag, Guahaquini, $100 bag, Haji Malago." So this is classic Howard Hemsley, who was prosecuted for dealing marijuana, but never went to trial because the court found that he was incapable of participating in his own defense. An interesting wrinkle. So, little editorialization here. Drama, like the joint, as you were, was passed around the argument with a potent display of courage from one of the supporters of the bill. Now, I don't know if what Howard did, Manganiti Roberto did, in saying, you know, I've got a $50 bag and a $100 bag, who wants it? I don't know if that's a display of courage, a display of foolhardiness, or a display of disrespect for the whole public hearing process. I guess everyone would have his own ideas about that. Maybe Jay? Not Jack, Jay, huh? Maybe Jay can tell us a little bit about that. Good afternoon, Jay.
Hi, Bob. Welcome back.
Thanks. It's good to be home.
This is your neighbor. And
oh, that Jay. Yeah. Okay. Hi, Jay.
Hi. How are you?
Good. Good.
I'm calling because what hasn't been discussed is Howard Trapp's, I thought, convincing argument that the entire law, if presented, would be inorganic. And what's interesting is that there hasn't been more discussion about the fact that CNMI has pursued this, and they have a very similar legal structure with the federal government. So how in the world are we going to pursue this process if at the end of the day, the federal government is in a position to nullify any of the activity that the territory is going to take?
I have talked about these concepts at some length before, starting out with the idea that everybody in the legislature and the governor takes an oath to support the Constitution and laws of the United States. So, we all know what the law of the United States is, so passing this kind of bill certainly is not supporting the laws of the United States. Second, there's a section in the Organic Act that says the governor is responsible for the execution of the laws of the United States. So we're in a different position from any of the states because our quasi-constitution requires the governor to execute these laws. So if nothing else, there's a large amount of hypocrisy involved here where people take an oath and do the exact opposite of what the oath requires.
Well, I think that,
go ahead, Jay.
Well, I'm just saying that, I mean, it may well be if a poll was taken that people might favor this, and there hasn't been one. There hasn't been any sort of formal public outreach to determine just what the impact would be. But it would be a shame if all of this discussion was simply a waste of time, because the federal government would never allow any of these laws to take effect.
The Organic Act as drafted allowed the Congress to void any act of the Guam legislature within 1 year. That provision was taken out, so one would think that it's open-ended. However, Congress has never voided any act of the legislature, and perhaps it would be a stretch to think that Congress would void this particular statute, given the national government's tolerance of the states that have legalized, quote-unquote, marijuana. The interesting challenge will arise probably in some sort of a collateral sense. People don't realize it, but if you were in the marijuana business, the income tax laws would not allow you to expense anything except the cost of goods sold. You couldn't expense ordinary business expenses that you could expense in any other business. So it's not going to be as profitable as a lot of people think, unless one is very careful with the proceeds of marijuana sales. He can run smack dab into a money laundering charge. Although the feds might not be that hot on marijuana, they certainly are on money laundering. So I suspect that if the statute is going to be challenged, it'll be challenged collaterally in one of these kinds of issues.
Yeah, I think it'd be extremely difficult to even import the equipment, import the items if it's specifically dedicated to this industry. Wouldn't that be in violation of federal law? And why would any entrepreneur in a market this small want to expose himself to that sort of potential liability?
And that was my thought. And then I heard somebody say, well, you know, we need to get ahead of this. We need to do something here before the feds change their mind and totally decriminalize marijuana. But as soon as that happens, the little mom and pop marijuana operations here are going to be out of business anyhow. So we're trying to begin something that really, first of all, is illegal. Second, is very complicated, and third, probably isn't going to have much of a life anyhow.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if a lot of this is simply a big waste of time.
I would suspect so.
Yeah. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks for calling, Jay. Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you, too.
So long. Okay, so Jay makes an interesting point. Yeah, the fact that the possession, cultivation, et cetera, of marijuana is against the national law is something that people want to just brush aside and say, well, you know, in Colorado, they're doing this, and in California, they're doing that. It's not quite the same thing as attempting to do it in an unorganized territory of the United States, giving the legal framework in which the territory exists. Got another phone call here from Jack. Wow. Okay, tell me what I need to know, Jack.
Well, I'm just hoping that you'll have this great weekend, and it's the start of Lent, so I'm a little bit on the calm side. One of the reasons why I quit really listening to a lot of local talk radio is because it seems when we always go back to this issue of marijuana, and I don't know. You know, I had an epic event happen to me in '83 that really changed my outlook on it, and so I'm kind of biased about it. So what happened in '83 is I grew up. I became an adult.
It happens to the best of us, Jack.
Childish things. So, you know, if you asked me prior to '83, I'd say, yeah, I'll do it, man. Legalize it. It's natural stuff, but you know, unfortunately, you know, reality sits in, and adult things have to be handled in an adult way. And it's just, if people think that herbs and spices is their way of curing their illness, I'm all for it, man. The power of the mind is an amazing thing. The placebo effect is a real thing. So if you think that taking this stuff helps you, go for it. More of the science and measured milligrams and stuff like that, and precise medicine. But I'm not to judge anybody that takes this alternative route. And so, you know, more power to you. And, you know, these things, it just amazes me that when I see people over the age of 21, you know, trying to rationalize the use of marijuana on a recreational basis, I said, listen, man, I grew up. I'm sorry.
You know, Jack,
I didn't evolve. I didn't get smarter. I just came to the realization that when you become an adult, you have a responsibility.
You use the key word there, Jack, rationalization. And I think we're seeing a lot of phenomena in our society now where people are doing things that are off kilter.
Yeah, they rationalize their actions, and rationalize doesn't mean reasoning.
Yeah, so in order to avoid cognitive dissonance, where they say they stand for one thing but they do something else, there's this rationalization. You know, well, yeah, marijuana. You know, I was told that it's not a good thing to use any mind-altering substance. But,
exactly.
But it's okay because it's a medicine, or it's okay because they do it in Colorado, or
it's natural.
It's natural, or it's okay. It's okay because before I do it, I always throw salt over my shoulder, or some kind of a rationalization like that. So the highest form of rationalization is to get some sort of statute passed. You know, that, for instance, that allows Herman to marry Henry. You could change your birth certificate so that it matches your idea of what you'd really like to be, or that you legalize for recreational purposes that which has been a criminal item up until now. It may just be a form of sophisticated rationalization, Jack.
I think much of what we are facing nowadays, decisions are hinged on a rational basis instead of reasoning. And yeah, a lot of emotions involved. I try to get out of it. It's hard now to listen to radio, local talk show, because it just doesn't, doesn't bite my interest. But like I said, if you asked me prior to '83, I would be probably there in the legislation. But yay, hip, whatever, with the crowd. But once I turn 18, and the realization sits in, you just have to temper it with reason and knowledge. And these are the times that we are in. When you have someone that's a potential candidate that claims to be Indian, when you have someone that's part of the NAACP that isn't black and is a leader, and like you say about the identity politics, it's
identity politics and forced pretending, Jack. Well,
you don't even have to be a boy now to be in the Boy Scouts.
Really? Well, when it comes to talk radio, you know where to go for the real talk radio, right, Jack?
Yeah. So you have a great weekend, and happy Lenten season as we go in and we try to breach this year with reason, knowledge, and a little bit of calmness.
See you on Monday, Jack. So here we go. We're entering the home stretch, and we're going to go to a couple of those feature presentations down the home stretch.
Experience the Take Care difference. Take Care members can count on accessing a high-quality, credentialed network of on-island providers, including the convenient one-stop FHP Health Center and Urgent Care, access to an extensive off-island network of providers, and the island's largest offering of free fitness classes and health education programs. You can count on Take Care to deliver comprehensive, accredited insurance coverage and quality health care when and where you need it. Take Care. Our island, your health plan. Learn more at takecareasia.com.
Portions of whole shrimp and a spread of guacamole served on freshly baked bread, paired with vegetables cut fresh daily in restaurants and sauces that are sure to excite your taste buds. Hurry in, it's only available for a limited time. Other fresh Lenten flavors include the classic tuna or the mouth-watering greatness of our seafood sensation. Don't forget the Veggie Max, a delicious and tasty vegetarian patty. Visit any of our convenient locations today. At Subway, you make it what you want.
So here we are on the home stretch of Tall Tales. I got about 7 minutes to go, so I promised that I would get into a couple of the features of Tall Tales. I'm going to start out with Our Planet is Not Fragile, and I hope that the folks who write editorials at the Daily News are listening. But I have an article here that describes some of the natural phenomenon that has happened to our Earth, that the Earth somehow seemed to survive. Yesterday, I mentioned that the 1883 eruption of Krakatoa volcano in Indonesia had the force of 200 megatons of TNT. That's the equivalent of 13,300 15-kiloton atomic bombs, the kind that destroyed Hiroshima in World War II. In other words, it was like dropping 13,000 Hiroshima A-bombs on the Earth. Well, we're still here. The next item here, before that was the 1815 Tambora eruption, the largest volcanic eruption, the largest known volcanic eruption. It spewed so much debris into the atmosphere that 1816 became known as the year without a summer. It led to crop failures and livestock death in the Northern Hemisphere, producing the worst famine of the 19th century. Now, this wasn't caused by burning fossil fuel or people driving something other than Priuses. So I've got some more of these, and I'll read one every day to show that our planet is not that fragile. And if you think that, that burning a little bit of fossil fuel is going to be the end of the world, you might want to rethink your position. The other feature presentation I have goes back to the bad old days, the way things were for kids who were born in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Well, I was born in the 30s, so a lot of these things applied to me. Yesterday I mentioned that we survived being born to mothers who may have smoked or drank while they were pregnant. We're still here. And then as infants and children, we would ride in cars with no car seats, no booster seats, no seat belts, no airbags, ball tires, and sometimes no brakes. We didn't have all those modern things back in the 50s. And riding in the back of a pickup on a warm day was always a special treat. Well, on Guam it still is. You can't ride a bicycle without a helmet. But you can ride in the back of a pickup truck without a helmet or a seatbelt or anything else, so long as you're 12 years old. Back in the 50s, we drank water from the garden hose and not from a bottle. We shared one soft drink with 4 friends from one bottle, and no one actually died from this. We ate cupcakes, white bread, real butter, bacon. We drank Kool-Aid made with real white sugar, and we weren't overweight. Yeah. Why? Because we were always outside playing, that's why. This was in the days before the helicopter parent. The way things are now, and I know this from my own observation, there are kids, up till 12 years old, maybe even a little older, that go through an entire day and they're not out of adult supervision at any given time during the day. There's an adult around them or they're around adults all day. We would leave home in the morning and play all day as long as we were back when the street lights came on. No one was able to reach us all day, and we were okay. And that's certainly true of the way it was back in the little town where I grew up. You'd get up and you'd be out playing with your friends, and maybe you'd have lunch with one of your friends or whatever. And later on in the day, as twilight loomed, you'd play games like hide-and-go-seek and kick the can, etc., and there was something to do all day long, and none of it was directed by adults. It just shows you how backward we were in those days. We would spend hours building our go-karts out of scraps and then ride them downhill, only to find out that we forgot about brakes. After running into the bushes a few times, we learned to solve the problem. So those were the bad old days. Now I've got some more tales of woe here to tell you how rough things were on people born in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, but we'll pick that up after during the home stretch tomorrow. Not tomorrow, I mean on Monday. So we'll see you all then. The real Joe and I are going to have to jones a little bit for tall tales for a couple days, but we'll be back on Monday.